It didn't happen on the court. It didn't happen in a championship loss. It didn't even happen in front of the cameras. The moment that shook women's basketball to its core happened quietly, behind closed doors, with a single decision that no one saw coming. The New York Liberty, a team built to dominate, a team designed to become a dynasty, pulled the trigger on a move so shocking that it left their MVP, Breanna Stewart, visibly stunned. And that stunned reaction wasn't just disbelief. It was the sound of a bond being broken, a dynasty cracking, and the first domino falling in what could become the most disastrous collapse in WNBA history. For weeks, the official narrative has been carefully polished, spun into neat corporate language, a proactive step, an evolution for the future, a calculated decision. But if you peel back the press releases and staged sound bites, the truth becomes much darker. Because this wasn't just a coaching change, it was a betrayal. A betrayal of loyalty, a betrayal of trust, and a betrayal of the very foundation this championship team was built on. And here's the part that the Liberty front office doesn't want you to think about: the timing. This wasn't a move made during a rebuild or after years of stagnation. This was a decision dropped right on the doorstep of the most important free agency period in franchise history, when every star player, Stewart, Ionescu, and Jonquel Jones, holds the power to walk away. In other words, the Liberty didn't just fire their coach, they may have set fire to their own dynasty. The ripple effects of that single move are still spreading, but already the cracks are showing. Players are furious, rivals are circling, and fans are starting to ask the one question the Liberty front office can't afford to answer. Why would a championship franchise deliberately destroy itself from the inside? Today we're pulling apart the official story and connecting the dots. From Stewart's public stance of loyalty to the explosive rumors about politics inside the locker room, this is the hidden story of how one of the league's brightest super teams may have just been dismantled, not by a rival on the court, but by betrayal at the very top. So buckle in, because what you're about to hear isn't the clean version being pushed in headlines. It's the version the Liberty would rather you ignore. The version that exposes the chaos behind the curtain of a champion. When Breanna Stewart sat down in front of the cameras just days before the firing, she wasn't speaking in carefully measured cliches. She was speaking from the heart. Asked about her head coach, Sandy Brondello, Stewart didn't hesitate. She doubled down on her loyalty, saying Brondello had their backs and they had hers. For a leader, for an MVP, that's not just a quote, it's a public line in the sand. And that's why what happened next landed like a bomb inside the locker room. Because days later, that very same coach, the one Stewart had just vouched for, was gone. Fired, erased from the equation without warning. The front office didn't just ignore their star players' words, they bulldozed right through them. Think about the message that sends to your best player, the face of your franchise, the one who brought you a championship. It says, loyalty doesn't matter. It says, your voice carries no weight. It says, trust is optional, as long as management gets to spin the story their way. That's why Stewart's stunned, unfiltered reaction wasn't just disappointment, it was betrayal caught on camera. Because in sports, players can forgive tough losses. They can even forgive bad seasons. But what they almost never forgive is when the organization betrays their loyalty. This wasn't about X's and O's. This wasn't about strategy or evolution. This was a direct slap in the face to the team's leaders, a declaration of war on their own locker room. And when the people in charge choose war over trust, the fallout is never small. It's explosive. But the betrayal didn't stop with Stewart's words being ignored. The real dagger came from the timing. And that's where the story turns from reckless to catastrophic. In sports, timing is everything. A great move made at the wrong moment can destroy a franchise faster than a bad season ever could. And that's exactly what makes this decision by the Liberty front office so catastrophic. This wasn't a move made after years of decline. This wasn't a calculated change during a rebuild. No, this firing landed right on the eve of the most important free agency period in Liberty history. At the very moment when keeping their superstar core together was the single most critical priority, management decided to light a fire under the foundation instead. Here's the reality. Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, and Jonquel Jones, three pillars of the championship roster, are all entering free agency right now, which means their future with the team is not guaranteed. And here's the kicker. As of today, the defending champions have just 2 players locked under contract for next season. 2. That's not the foundation of a dynasty. That's the skeleton of a franchise one bad off-season away from collapse.
So let's put this in perspective. Imagine winning your first ever championship, celebrating in front of a packed New York crowd, and then within months, staring down the possibility of walking into the next season with only 2 names on the roster. That's not progress, that's Russian roulette with the entire franchise. By pulling the trigger on this firing now, the Liberty front office didn't just disrespect their players, they handed them the perfect excuse to walk. Because why would Stewart or Ionescu or Jones commit the prime years of their careers to an organization that just proved loyalty means nothing? Why tie your future to a GM willing to gamble a dynasty on a move that makes no logical sense? This wasn't proactive, this wasn't bold. It was reckless timing that turned a locker room crack into a fault line ready to swallow the entire franchise. And once you understand the timing, the official justification, evolution, and forward thinking falls apart completely. Because if this were really about performance, the facts tell a very different story. On paper, the Liberty front office has tried to sell this firing as a performance issue. They've used polished words like evolution, innovation, and proactive adjustment to frame it as a necessary step toward the future. But once you look at the facts, that justification collapses instantly. Let's rewind to the start of the season. With Brondello at the helm, the Liberty stormed out of the gate with a franchise record 9-0 start. 9 straight wins. At that moment, they looked untouchable, like the dynasty everyone expected them to be. That wasn't luck, and it wasn't coincidence. It was the product of smart coaching, a unified locker room, and a system that was clicking at every level. Then, disaster struck. Not in the film room, not on the sidelines, but in the trainer's office. Jonquel Jones, their dominant big, missed 13 games with an ankle sprain. Breanna Stewart, the MVP and cornerstone of the franchise, went down for 13 games with a bone bruise in her knee. Sabrina Ionescu, the heart of their backcourt, was sidelined for 6 games with a toe injury. 3 of their best players gone for long stretches of the season. That would sink almost any team. Most coaches in that position would have watched the season spiral into chaos. But Brondello didn't fold. She adapted. She cycled through 18 different starting lineups, tying a league record just to keep the team competitive. And somehow, against all odds, she still dragged that battered roster into the playoffs. That's not failure, that's resilience. That's proof of elite coaching. If anything, it was one of Brondello's finest performances as a leader, keeping a fractured roster alive when the season should have been dead. So let's be clear. Firing her had nothing to do with results. If it were really about wins and losses, Brondello would have been celebrated, not scapegoated. Because no amount of forward-thinking spin can erase the obvious truth that this wasn't a collapse caused by bad coaching. It was a season undone by injuries, something no coach can control. Which raises the obvious question. If performance wasn't the real reason, then what was? Because once you eliminate the official excuse, you're left staring at the possibility the Liberty don't want anyone to talk about. The theory that this firing wasn't about basketball at all, but about politics and power inside the WNBA. When the official explanation makes no sense, fans and insiders start searching for the real story. And in this case, the theory catching fire across social media and fan forums is that Sandy Brondello's firing had less to do with performance and everything to do with politics. Here's where it gets interesting. During the 2025 WNBA All-Star Game, Brondello went out of her way to praise one player in particular, Caitlin Clark. She called Clark a great player, openly admired her skill set, and expressed excitement about coaching her on the All-Star stage. It seemed harmless, just a coach giving credit where it was due. But to some within the league's hyper-political environment, those words may have been seen very differently. Because in New York, loyalty isn't just expected, it's demanded. And praising Clark, the league's rising superstar, may have been interpreted by Liberty leadership as a subtle act of disloyalty toward their own established superteam core. At least, that's the speculation buzzing online. Fans are connecting dots and suggesting that Brondello's public admiration for Clark created tension with Liberty management, who wanted every ounce of attention focused on their own superteam core. Now let's be clear, there's no hard evidence that this was the exact reason for her firing. But what matters is not just whether it's true, it's that the decision was so illogical, so reckless, that a theory like this suddenly feels believable. And when speculation feels believable, it starts to shape perception. And perception is everything in sports. If you're Breanna Stewart, how do you look at your front office the same way, knowing that rumors like this even exist? How do you trust an organization that could be making franchise-altering moves based not on strategy, but on politics, jealousy, or fragile egos?
Because once trust is broken, once players begin to suspect decisions are being driven by politics instead of performance, it doesn't just fracture a team, it poisons the entire culture. And the rest of the league noticed. In fact, one rival coach didn't hesitate to weigh in, and her words made the Liberty look even worse. When the New York Liberty pulled the trigger on Sandy Brondello, the shockwaves weren't contained to Brooklyn. The ripple effect spread across the entire WNBA. Coaches, players, analysts, and fans, everyone had something to say, and almost none of it was flattering to the Liberty. Let's start with one of the loudest voices, Becky Hammon, head coach of the Las Vegas Aces. Never one to mince words, Hammon flat out called the firing weak. She said, and I quote, "If you don't want Sandy, I'll take her." That wasn't just a defense of Brondello, it was a direct shot at the Liberty organization. For Hammon, a two-time championship coach, to publicly call out a rival front office like that, that's unprecedented. It made the Liberty look not just ruthless, but foolish. And Hammon wasn't alone. Players across the league chimed in with disbelief. Social media lit up with posts from current and former WNBA stars questioning the timing, the reasoning, and the morality behind the move. The message was loud and clear. This wasn't just a business decision. It was a betrayal of a coach who had done nothing to deserve it. Even analysts who usually defend ownership couldn't find a silver lining. ESPN's panels tore into the decision, with one analyst bluntly saying, "If you fire a coach after she takes a broken roster to the playoffs, you're not sending a message about winning. You're sending a message about power." And that's the key word here, power. The perception that this wasn't about basketball, but about egos and control is now cemented across the league. The Liberty may have thought they were making a clean break toward the future, but instead they lit a fire under every rival and every critic. Because here's the hidden cost. The Liberty didn't just lose Sandy Brondello, they lost credibility. They lost trust. And in a league where relationships are everything, where free agency decisions often come down to trust and culture, that damage could haunt them for years. Think about it. If you're a star player considering signing with New York, how do you trust an organization that will throw a proven coach under the bus the moment things get tough? If you're an agent, how do you feel safe sending your client to a team where politics seem to matter more than loyalty? The Liberty wanted to look strong. Instead, they've been exposed as unstable. And the worst part? Their rivals are now circling, smelling blood in the water. Because in the WNBA, weakness doesn't just stay inside your locker room. It becomes a weapon other teams can use against you. And the Liberty may have just handed their enemies the sharpest weapon of all. If the firing of Sandy Brondello shook the league, it nearly shattered the Liberty from the inside. For weeks, the whispers of frustration and resentment had been circling the locker room, but now those whispers turned into open cracks. The most glaring tension centered around two of the team's biggest stars, Breanna Stewart and Ionescu. Stewart had always been a quiet leader, someone who led by example rather than fiery speeches. But sources close to the team say she was furious at how Brondello was treated. Stewart had built her move to New York on trust. Trust in the vision, trust in the coaching staff, trust in the stability of the organization. Watching that trust crumble overnight, that was personal. On the other side, Ionescu, the face of the Liberty's younger generation, found herself in an impossible position. Rumors swirled that the front office had leaned heavily on her during the decision-making process, asking whether she believed Brondello was still the right coach for the team's future. Even if she didn't have the final say, just being linked to the firing made her a target. Suddenly, the golden child of New York basketball was seen by some as a pawn of management, and by others as the player who stood by while her coach was blindsided. That kind of divide is poison inside a locker room. Players started choosing sides. Some backed Stewart, seeing her as the moral center betrayed by her own team. Others stuck with Ionescu, arguing that she was just trying to navigate the mess the front office had dumped on her. What was once one of the tightest locker rooms in the league suddenly felt like it was being pulled in two directions. And then came the real breaking point: reports of heated arguments behind closed doors. According to insiders, Stewart and Ionescu had at least one explosive exchange, with Stewart accusing management of using players like shields, while Ionescu fired back that she was being unfairly blamed for decisions she never made.
This wasn't just drama, it was fracture. Every championship team needs unity, trust, and a shared purpose. The Liberty now had the opposite: suspicion, resentment, and doubt. And when those emotions take root, they don't just vanish. They linger. They fester. They become the kind of weight that drags down an entire season. The Liberty thought they could control the narrative. Instead, they created chaos. Because when your two biggest stars are caught in a cold war, no front office spin can glue the pieces back together. And here's the part the Liberty didn't want anyone to notice. This wasn't just about Brondello anymore. This was about the soul of the team. A franchise built on promises of loyalty, vision, and greatness was now standing at the edge of collapse. But the real danger wasn't just inside the locker room. It was what happened when those fractures became public, and the entire league saw just how broken the Liberty had become. What happened with Sandy Brondello wasn't just a messy breakup between a coach and her team. It was a mirror held up to the entire WNBA, a reminder that beneath the highlight reels and inspiring headlines, this league is still fighting some of the same battles it's been wrestling with for years: control, politics, and power plays that go far beyond the court. Because if we're being honest, the Liberty's decision exposed a truth no one wanted to admit. The WNBA has entered an era where winning basketball isn't always the only priority. Image, sponsorships, player branding, and front office egos are all becoming just as important, sometimes more important, than actual results. Think about it. Brondello wasn't fired because she failed. She was fired because the optics didn't align with the narrative ownership wanted to sell. That's not just cold, it's dangerous. Because when business starts outranking loyalty, you're no longer building a team, you're building a machine. And machines don't care who they crush along the way. The ripple effect? Every player, every coach, every agent watching this saga unfold suddenly has to ask, who's really in charge here? Is it the coaches drawing up plays in the huddles? or the executives pulling strings in back rooms. And here's where the bigger picture gets even darker. The Liberty aren't the only team facing this kind of power struggle. Around the league, you can see similar cracks forming. Rumors of front offices meddling in rotations, coaches being pressured to feature certain stars from marketability instead of chemistry, agents privately admitting that fit doesn't matter anymore. What matters is how much control ownership wants over the narrative. The Brondello firing just threw gasoline on all of it. Suddenly, every coach is looking over their shoulder. Every player is wondering if loyalty really means anything. And every fan is realizing the league they love might be far more political and far less pure than the storyline sold to them. This is what makes the Liberty saga so significant. It isn't just about one coach losing her job. It's about the WNBA's growing pains in real time. The league wants to be bigger, flashier, and more marketable. But in chasing that, it risks losing the very trust and authenticity that made it special in the first place. And that's the irony. The Liberty thought they were making a bold move toward the future. Instead, they became the cautionary tale of the present. Because now the question isn't, can the Liberty recover from this? It's, can the WNBA avoid letting this kind of chaos define its next chapter? The New York Liberty super team isn't just at a crossroads. It's standing on the edge of a cliff. What started as a single shocking firing has grown into something far bigger, a full-blown crisis that could reshape the entire league. Breanna Stewart's stunned reaction, Sabrina Ionescu's impossible position, the fractured locker room, and the front office's reckless timing have all combined into a perfect storm. And make no mistake, the consequences aren't hypothetical anymore. Every superstar on the roster now holds the power to walk away. Every rival is watching, waiting, and calculating how to exploit New York's chaos. Fans are asking the questions no one in the Liberty organization wants to answer. Will Stewart leave? Will Ionescu bolt? Will Jonquel Jones even consider staying? This isn't about a single coach or a single season. It's about trust that can't be rebuilt, alliances that have been broken, and a dynasty that may never be the same. The Liberty thought they were shaping a future. Instead, they've exposed just how fragile the present really is. And yet the story isn't over. Free agency is coming. Every decision, every move, every rumor over the next few months will be magnified. The Liberty may try to spin it, fans may cling to hope, but the truth is written in the fractures they created. So here's the question nobody can answer yet. Will the Liberty survive this storm, or has management's betrayal ensured that their super team era is over before it really began? One thing is certain, the next chapter is going to be explosive. And when it breaks, the entire WNBA will be watching. If you want to see every move Stewart, Ionescu, and Jones make, the fallout from free agency, and the true cost of this front office's decisions, make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell on. Because the story isn't just continuing, it's about to explode.